Welcome to this week's End of Days Update, coming to you from Tulsa, Oklahoma. We had such a great time this last weekend in Omaha at Faith Family Church. People were so hungry. We had 3 services there. And then if this weekend you're anywhere near Hattiesburg, Mississippi, we'll be at Victory Church there. We'll have a great time. We'll actually be there Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. We'll have a wonderful time. Great church. Love end times, and we'll get into it. So we're coming to you every week to look at the different things that point to the coming of the Lord, specifically the gathering of nations for the Ezekiel 38 war, because the rapture is signless, but the second coming has tons of signs, and we talked about it in the book. Our book, I think there's 79 or 80 in the book. Pretty amazing how blatant it is, how you can view the coming of the Lord looking at the signs. You know, signs aren't there to scare people. The signs are there to show you how close you are to your destination. So it's amazing to be living when verse after verse after verse is coming to pass. And Jesus said, when you see these things, he didn't say get scared or freak out. He said, let not your heart be troubled. He said, don't be deceived, don't be troubled. He said, I want you happy, hopeful, and comforted. 5 things about the coming of the Lord, and they're all good news. So hearing about the coming of the Lord is not an escape theology, it's a hustle theology. So we get into these things every week to see what's happening around Israel, because it blatantly points to scriptures coming to pass, literally old prophecies. We had one this week come to pass with an old mosaic they found that's in the Valley of Megiddo, where the Battle of Armageddon is going to be. So it's an interesting thing that things are located right where the Bible says would be the focal point, right here before we depart the planet. Just like with the Euphrates River running dry, it was ice doing that. Now it's naturally running dry, so the kings of the east can come over at the second coming. So, man, there's so much going on. And Jesus was really pointed about this. When the madman of Gadara came in, those demons said to Jesus, have you come to torment us before the time? Indicating that Jesus was on a schedule, but he was early, so demons can know the schedule, how much more the church should know. So that's the whole point of this. Jesus said, when you see these things, lift up your heads, your redemption is drawing nigh, indicating he doesn't want you downtrodden. So the whole point of hearing about the coming of the Lord and how near it is so you make changes, you hustle and accelerate, and you're happy. I'm in awe of people going, well, we don't need to hear preaching on the coming of the Lord. Well, the Bible says it's the hope that purifies you even as you're pure. So Paul talked about the baptism 12 times, coming of the Lord 52 times. For every one verse there is about the first coming, 8 times more about the second coming. Very documented so we could tell. So let's pick up with what's happened in Israel. We tried to go into some things. These are kind of cool because almost everything I want to talk about today I've not seen in not single one publication in the United States. These are all overseas. I'm intrigued that we just don't hardly get anything here in the country, but a lot is happening with Iran and Israel right now. You see it kind of breaking forward right in front of our eyes. You're like, oh my gosh. Iran was touting their 400-second missile. And I love that the Jerusalem Post quoted that it's an old prophecy from Isaiah 17:14, that literally the war of Gog and Magog could last 12 minutes. A couple hundred years ago, one of the rabbis said that. Because of the missiles, that missile can go Mach 13 and Mach 12. But it's a big deal. Look what happened this last weekend. Israel took out a huge convoy of missiles coming from Iran down into Syria to get to Hezbollah. They were to be changed there in Damascus, sent on over to Hezbollah. And so they said it was a massive explosion Saturday night. They said it's probably the largest one that they've had to take out in quite a while. That's why Hezbollah's leader, Nasrallah, came out again this last weekend saying, we'll wipe Israel off the map. He said, we'll wipe Israel to the Stone Age. And he also said, he basically talked about Israel's problems with their government. So it's weird that Nasrallah is going over a program of making their government look weird. It's just so strange hearing that. And I love how Israel responded again, saying, we'll not only wipe you into the Stone Age, he started listing targets that Israel had. It's kind of a big deal because you have all these reservists that they're concerned about not having the Israeli Air Force ready, so that to the point that you had our head of our army go to Israel to check on Israel's basically readiness. This is a huge deal, and when it looks like they're not ready for this, because some things came out this week from Europe that are pretty shocking. Because right now, in the midst of this, the U.S. is doing a deal with Iran, kind of a prisoner exchange, and Israel said, well, that doesn't do anything about their nuclear weapons. It's only about a prisoner exchange. So let's talk about now. A couple of newspapers came out in Europe that there's some intelligence findings from Sweden, from Germany, and the Netherlands showing that Iran is ready to test a nuclear weapon. This is how amazing it was. There was a joint comprehensive plan of action signed by Iran. They broke every single one of their promises in the last 2 years, completely using increasingly more sophisticated centrifuges to enrich uranium, to the point that it was so advanced that there's no one overseeing this at all, to the point that they're ready to test a nuclear weapon. So Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was going to go on vacation this last week. He decided to stay at home. Now, the weird unrest in Israel is all being paid for Ehud Barak, one of the older prime ministers. He's literally single-handedly paying for and trying to take out Benjamin Netanyahu. It's so weird that the left cannot handle conservative right. There was a report that came out in the Jerusalem Post saying Israel's left is basically hijacking the country just like America's left is trying to hijack the U.S. It's bizarre how everything's mirroring each other perfectly. But man, you've got Iran doing, so the Swedish newspaper said, industrial espionage to steal components and to buy components and to acquire components so they can finish off this nuclear weapon, and that they are ready to have a test right now. So many more things are happening. You got floods in China. You got tornadoes in China. You got floods in India. You have that horrible fire that happened in Hawaii. I mean, there's so many things that are happening in the environment. You had solar flares last week that were absolutely massive. You had a meteor shower. So many things happening with the earth, many things happening with signals, but the main thing is Iran and its missile program are what's being emboldened this last week. So it's happening right in front of our eyes. So what does this tell us? That you're seeing the players for the Ezekiel 38 war get in position because Jesus is just about to come. So we always go back to the word. Number one, Israel made a nation. Number two, Jerusalem won back. Jesus said the generation sees those two events won't pass away till all is fulfilled. But then you got the Hebrew language restored, Ethiopian Jews brought back. You've got the fertility of the land of Israel. You've got the revival of the Roman Empire. I mean, all these are blatantly showing us how close we are. You have the ritual baths around the Temple Mount fill up with water. You had foxes show up on the Temple Mount. You had fish show up in the Dead Sea. You had the Dead Sea turn blood red where Sodom and Gomorrah was on the Day of Atonement. You have 172 different species of predatory birds show up. You have Russia going to Ukraine, Russia going to Crimea. You have America this last week, which is pushing Iran not to sell drones to Russia. I mean, there's so much happening with that it's escalating. We're sending another $200 million package to the Ukraine right now. This is our 44th package to help the Ukraine hold off Russia. You got Belarus, you got Poland doing things, getting ready for war. So all this is happening that are joining with the signs. Pretty crazy. You got men will be lovers themselves. You have selfie sticks. So you got all these things happening. You have Rabbi Yitzhak Kaduri that got saved, prophesied 15 years ago that right before the coming of the Lord, Israel will be ruled by two Benjamins. You have Benjamin Netanyahu and Benjamin Gantz that were ruling jointly together. One thing after another, blatant signs right in front of us showing us how close we are. I really like the ones with all the animals and the fish and the birds and all that, because you got nature getting in position. Man, this is one I forgot about earlier. There's a young lady with autism in Israel that pretty much produced a flawless calendar for temple worship so that they're ready for the third temple and they have everything set up for worship. Kind of cool that this young lady was smart enough to lay everything out for everyone so that they're ready to have temple worship. Well, you had Russia put in the archway for Baal worship in Palmyra. That's where the Tower of Babel was. And the Talmud says that's the last sign you'll see right before the coming of the Lord. So it's blatant sign after sign after sign after sign. And remember, the signs aren't there to scare people. The signs are there to show you how close you are to your destination. They don't freak you out. They go, wow, it makes it more blatant to us. So there's all these signs. There's many more. But it's so cool to see living on the earth when scriptures are coming to pass. But then you go from signs to signals. The Bible said that the planets would be for signals for us. And you have literally at the birth of Jesus, you had Jupiter, Regulus, and Venus come together, Bethlehem star. What was the constellation? Virgo. This last year, what was the constellation? Leo. He's the lion of the tribe of Judah. First time in 2,000 years. And then before that, you had the blood red moons on Passover and Tabernacles, 4 in a row. When's the last time you had 4 in a row? NASA calls it a tetrad. 1967 when Jerusalem was won back. 1948 when Israel was made a nation. And 1492 at the Edict of Expulsion when the Jews were kicked out of Spain. And God raised up Columbus to sail the ocean blue in 1492. Founded America, harbor for the Jews. So we're watching everything literally play out in front of our eyes. So what do? Help our local church, help our local pastor. We're on point with being in church. We don't fit church into our life. It is our life. You have to overfeed yourself right now because of the environment that we live in. I don't get into all the transgender stuff, all the stuff that's happening with the weird stuff all over, but there's so much more happening that's absolutely beyond bizarre every single week. So I try to focus on the military stuff that shows us how close we are to the Ezekiel 38 war. But we are also blessed. We're about to see the King. Wow, we're to rejoice. Jesus said, lift up your head, your redemption draws nigh, so he wants you excited. All these signs are because he loves you so much. He wants to bless you, wants to strengthen you. He's not mad at you. He loves you. So how blessed are we that we can see the series of time right in front of our eyes that we're about to see the King. Wow. Well, come back next week. We'll look at all what's happened with Iran. I'm sure more will come to light about them getting ready to test a nuclear weapon because we're about to see the King. Have a great week. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks for joining us today at the End of Days Update. If you'd like to be notified every time there's a new post, just go to the EDU at josephmorris.com and subscribe to receive email alerts. If these posts and updates have been a blessing to you, please consider making a one-time donation to help get the message out, or even becoming a monthly partner with Joseph Morris Ministries. Thanks again for tuning in to the EDU, and we'll see you next week.